This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook. Today is May 30th, 2024. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
My name is Jordan Stoopler. I guess officially I was with Hofstra Radio. It was only for a short time because I came as a grad student. So I was there officially for a little over a year or so, from like 2019, the fall, until late summer 2020.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. And just by those dates, I can think it's easy to say those were interesting times.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Okay. What shows or programs did you work on at the station?
I kind of tapped into a little bit of everything. I was involved in the news department. Started off as a writer, later became producer and anchor on Newsline, which is the half-hour weekday news program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also, for a period of time, was engineered for the Italian music show on Saturday mornings. I did that
Hmm.
for a bit. But I guess my main large part of my work was devoted to the sports department across different facets. I was the women's soccer beat reporter for the station for the 2019 season. So I covered the team and got to appear on The Locker Room, which is the weekly Hofstra Pride sports show, rather regularly, especially during season. Did some Long Island Nets games. But I would say that what I became most known for, what I would probably devoted most of my time at the station, was to New York Islanders hockey.
Hmm.
During the 2019-20 season, I again did a little bit of everything. What I particularly enjoyed doing and became kind of my hallmark, I guess, was I produced a lot of the feature stories that ran during the intermissions of games.
Hmm.
So those were long form pre-recorded uh, um, packages that were played during games. I did updates during games. Obviously, I reported live from games as well, in addition to producing the odd game in studio and what have you. So I was had all hands on the a lot of hands on the Islanders during that particular season, and then it shifted into they had a long playoff run, but
Mm-hmm.
that was during COVID, so there was it's kind of an interesting story, yeah. But so yeah, a lot of my focus was on the Islanders.
Wow. So you weren't there terribly long as these things go, but you certainly seems like you did a lot there. Did you have any titles or positions of management?
Nothing in management. I guess I was there too short to be able to
Hmm.
get those positions. Like I guess different titles. I mean, would be because what I'd mentioned, just specific titles when it came to like reporter and that kind of thing, but
Right.
none in specifically in management.
Okay. When you were on the air, did you ever use any nicknames or on-air personality names?
Um, I don't believe so. Any
Okay.
nicknames I might have had, just you know, people might have called me, I think, like Stoop, like around the station, but on air, I was always just my regular name.
Okay. Okay. Understood. Just a moment ago, you said that you joined the station and you were a graduate student. So that's not completely unusual, but it's somewhat unusual. So I guess if you don't mind, let's go back to when you joined the station. And if you don't mind telling us what brought you there, and then maybe tell us what the station was like when you got there, or maybe some people that you met, what was going on when you first showed up.
hmm So another interesting thing that you'll discover now is, in addition to being a grad student, I'm actually an international student. So I'm from Montreal, Canada.
Hmm.
Is actually where I am now. Born and raised there, and so for me, I mean, I did my undergrad here in journalism in Montreal. And one thing about Montreal that may or may not know, obviously, it's a hockey hotbed.
Hmm.
So we had one of the original six teams, and hockey is basically a religion here. So year round, 24/7, even through the summer, that's all they're talking about here is on sports talk radio is hockey, 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 and the Montreal Canadiens. And so I've always kind of been interested. Obviously, kind of grow up in that environment, so you get through passed down from generation through my grandparents and my dad. So was into hockey and from a young age. And so I guess what maybe brought me to the station or first got me to realize the impact on what WRHU was when I was young. For a number of years, our like yearly family vacations that we would take would be to South Florida, and it would always be over the Christmas and New Year's holidays.
Hmm.
And we're a family of five, and international plane tickets, the prices and whatever were, especially during that peak season, were rather expensive. So we'd actually go by car from Montreal to South Florida, which is
Wow.
like 1,600 miles drive over like 2 days, 3 days. So you can imagine there's a lot of time to kill in the car. And I must have been around maybe 11 or 12, early teens, maybe, or preteens. And I remember it's still vividly actually that I was kind of playing around. We had a Sirius XM satellite radio subscription. So I was kind of just playing around and, obviously trying to find different, sports stations or even some games. And I stumbled upon an Islanders game broadcast that was being simulcast onto Sirius XM, and quickly, came to realize, oh, like, I heard the Hofstra WRHU radio Hofstra University spots and the station ID, and was immediately kind of intrigued by the fact that, wow, like, this is a college station, yet they're broadcasting an NHL team's game broadcasts. So it was kind of interesting to me at that young age. And
Hmm.
I knew that I was into sports and into sports media at that time. So I guess it was something that I filed in the back of my mind. I was still young, and, obviously it's pretty far pretty far away. But I guess, if you flash forward then to, it was the spring of 2018. I was just wrapping up my undergrad degree, my bachelor's degree, um, in Montreal, and I was kind of looking at next steps after graduating, and grad school was one of them. And immediately just kind of came back into my ethos or into my mind about Hofstra and its association with the Islanders, and I guess started to do a little bit more thorough research into the school and the station, and just, I guess, was immediately um, intrigued about going there, and I applied to the master's journalism program. I did a virtual interview, was accepted, and I guess the rest is history. I moved to Long Island a few months later to um, start my master's program, which was, it's a 2 year program, and naturally then to WRHU. And you ask about first getting into this, first time going into the station.
Yeah.
Like, I'd been to Long Island a number of times before, but I had never actually been on campus before, and so hadn't even seen the radio station in person. And as an international student, we actually had to arrive on campus like a week or so before classes began in September.
Right.
This whole week long orientation type program. So was there actually towards the end of August, which is before classes began and before really there was any kind of hustle and bustle at the radio station. But I knew when I got there that was one of the first places that I wanted to stop. Obviously, was the School of Communication, Lawrence Herbert School of Communication building. You know, not only because I guess that's where my classes were going to be, but also because obviously that was the headquarters to the radio station. And so I think it was like a weekday during late August, and I wasn't sure who was going to be there or what was going to go on, but I stopped by, and uh, I remember I met with Kenny Conrad,
Mm-hmm.
who was I think about to start his season as lead producer of the Islanders, and then he went on to other management positions at the station. And so we got to talking. He loves hockey, I love hockey, so we got to talking about that and a little bit about my background and past experience. And he quickly invited me, to fill out an application to join the station, which I did. And yeah, I guess started from there a few weeks later.
Wow, what a journey. That must have been very exciting to get on campus and go over and see the radio station and meet people. In your previous experience studying journalism, had you ever been in a radio station? Did you know what to expect from the facilities?
Yeah, a little bit. So we had a little it's kind of like a mock radio station in my undergrad where I went to school here, Concordia University here in Montreal. We mostly just used it. Like I took radio classes in undergrad, so we mostly used it. We would prepare actually like extended newscasts that would was actually one of our classes was simply to prepare weekly newscasts, and we would prepare them, with all the news and sports and everything, and it would be we would do that as part of our weekly class. So I had some experience there, and actually, just a few months prior to coming to Hofstra, I actually did an internship in Montreal at TSN 690 Radio, which is,
Hmm.
I guess, our equivalent of ESPN Radio, so all sports talk radio station in Montreal. So I was there for a few weeks, and so I got to see like what a professional sports radio station, how it operated um, on a weekly basis. So I did have um, some exposure to it. So I think that definitely helped me that I wasn't going into the station completely green. I had some kind of background to fall back
Hmm.
on.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good to have some familiarity, but still, so many people say they come into the radio station and they're just impressed with the technology and the facilities and how far things have gone. So I guess what I'm getting to is it when you first arrived, it seemed like it was worth the trip. At least at first, it seemed like it was worthwhile.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was excited to, it's always exciting to kind of be in a new environment and to be able to even you talk about the facilities. Like I walked in, I saw like both studios and all the board, which was state of the art. It's just like it just yeah, it definitely validated me choosing to go to grad school
Mhm.
in the States and at Hofstra.
Wow, great stuff. So you get there, you sign up for the class and you get invited, um, and you've got a little bit of experience from your classes in undergrad. But what was the training class like for you? Do you remember maybe who taught it or any lessons that you got from the training class?
Yeah, for sure. The training class was great. It's actually, you know, kind of crazy because I was accepted into the training class, I guess, that fall.
Hmm.
But I guess as grad students, our schedules on our classes are largely held in the evenings as grad students,
Yep.
and there's not many classes and there's not many selections. So it's your semester class load is basically decided for you pretty much beforehand. So I actually was stuck with a class that was conflicting with the training class during that fall, and I
Mm.
tried and tried to get out of that class and move it and try to take it another time, but I really couldn't. So I actually had to delay
Oh
my
no.
my entry into the training class to, I guess, January or February, the spring or winter of the next semester, which was really, really a bummer at first because I knew I was that it's a 2-year program, so I knew my time was super limited. So
Right.
to have to delay that even more was very frustrating at first. Um, but yeah, in the end, was able to take the class in the winter or spring, and yeah, it was a great experience just to be able to learn. And one thing that does stick out from the training class, one thing that I don't know if they still do it, but it was something that I particularly enjoyed was each week at the start of the training class, they would bring in what they called the staff member of the week. And it was
Hmm.
always someone who had certain standing at the station at that moment. And I remember vividly, it was early in the class, must have been like week 3 or 4. They brought in uh, a girl named Julia Presti.
Hmm.
So she was the assistant sports director at the time, and she went on to to succeed Lyanne Souza as the sports director during the bulk of, I would say, the bulk of my time officially in the station. And she talked a bit about, her background and um, how she made this rapid ascent as a sophomore at the time to the position she was in now, and all the hard work and how she was willing to tackle anything thrown her way, and she really just took the bull by the horns and really wouldn't say take no for an answer, did everything just to be able to get to where she wanted to be. And I think that just spoke to me and it resonated with me so much because I could see myself in her, in the sense that I knew that I didn't have a lot of time at the station. I wasn't going to have the 4 years or 3 years that every
Hmm.
people typically get, so I needed to really push myself and dedicate myself to the station. So hearing her story and how she got to where she was, it was sort of a aha moment for me where I was like, okay, this is what I need to be. This is the person that I need to speak with. I need to, maybe get to know better, and to be able to get to where I knew I wanted to be and what I aspired to be by the
Mm.
time I left the school or the
Wow.
station. Yeah.
Wow, what fantastic to have that moment, and again to be validated in your decision, and things are just pointing in the right direction for you. So you go through the training class, and I imagine there has to be a clearance process where you get approved to be on the air. Do you remember anything about that, and or getting on the air for the first time? What was that like?
Yeah, for sure. So another part of the training class that, in addition to the weekly, I guess, 2 hour weekly session, we had on our own time, we would schedule, they would pair us with, I guess, a mentor
Hmm.
who would kind of take us around, show us the station, show us the ropes. And I was super, super fortunate. And it kind of, the stars aligned that I was paired with a woman named, a student named Shayna Senstock. She was a master engineer at the station. Honestly, I think she still does, she does that now in her profession. She's like a master engineer behind the
Mm.
board. So this was super, super valuable because again, I knew you have to get engineer cleared for them pretty much to be able to even think about going on air. And so she was an outstanding teacher. Like I remember she prepared, like on her own doing, she prepared this like cheat sheet for trainees, just about, you know, detailed, like press this, then, like to really get us to nail everything down pat.
Hmm.
And so I would say because of her like astute and very thorough teaching methods, like I was able to really pick up on the board pretty quickly. So that enabled me to go on air relatively soon upon graduation from the training class.
Mm.
Um, as for the first time on air, I think it must have been towards the end of September of like 2019, that fall. As I mentioned, I was the beat reporter for the women's soccer team. And so that entails a lot of, going to practice and really becoming the expert on that particular Hofstra team.
Right.
Um, that semester, that season. And so, on the locker room show, the Hofstra Pride locker room show, they called on me rather early to kind of hop on the show. It was the first time I hopped on. It was just for one segment, just kind of to talk with the anchors that night about the team and what was going on and some opinion and some banter back and forth. I think it was must have been no longer than about 5-6 minutes, but like they felt so long because it felt like an eternity because you're stepping into this environment for the first time and the red light goes on and it's live and you're like, oh my god, like I hope I don't fumble. And I remember I had so much notes prepared because I was like, I need, even though I felt like I knew this team like inside and out because I was going and speaking to these players and the coach week after week, I was like, I don't want to stumble. I don't want to get anything wrong, any stat wrong. So I was really super, I guess a little bit in my head. I think that the segment went well. And actually, like even I would say like a few weeks later, I was even hosting the show. So I guess it went pretty well. But yeah, definitely super, super nervous. I think naturally, like the first time that red light goes on and you realize, they throw to you and, you have to come up with
Hmm.
something interesting to say like on the spot.
Wow. Wow, that's fantastic. Now, did you have any background with soccer? Was that a sport familiar to you, or was that kind of new for you as well?
Uh, it was kind of new, I follow soccer. I wouldn't like not as much as I followed hockey, but it was something that I keep tabs on. I guess I keep tabs on a lot of sports, like as a sports fan. We have it's probably Montreal Canadiens hockey here is king, but we do have actually an MLS team.
Hmm.
So I'd been I get to go to a couple games every year, and I follow I guess the MLS and how Montreal's doing. So I've watched games and obviously like World Cups and stuff like that. So I was sort of familiar with the sport, but I think just being able to cover that team week in week out, and it was a really they were a great team. They went on to like host like an NCAA tournament game which, that season, which was a first for the team in a long, long time. And great, great, great coach who's still there, Simon Rydiov, who's a tactician and really great um, explainer of the game. So I was
Mm.
really able to just through chatting with him. I really felt like I it was like a master class in terms of learning about the rudiments of soccer. So I left there obviously much more much more passionate even today for soccer, women's soccer, and soccer in general.
Hmm. Oh, that's great. Um, so I'm going to make an assumption here that growing up in Montreal, that you grew up a Canadians fan. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. I think my
So
dad grew up as a Canadiens fan, so he kind of passed it on to me for sure.
I
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the local law, but it's a pretty fair assumption that you're going to be a Canadians fan. But my question is, so now you're doing Islanders hockey, and it's not just Islanders fans that are in Long Island area. You've got Rangers fans, you've got Devils fans. Did you get any grief? Did you get any hazing from people about your team, or were there any rivalries based on fandom?
Uh, Amongst the station, I
Yeah,
guess, like station members.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think they're mostly Islanders fans, definitely for sure. And I was the unique, obviously, Montreal Canadian supporter. We actually had at the time one other Canadian who's now living in the States, but Canadian born person who was there at the station during my time, but he's from Toronto. So
Mm.
he's a Maple Leafs fan, and that's even like Montreal fans hate Maple Leafs fans.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, huge, huge rivalry. But yeah, it was kind of fun. We had um, Boston Bruins fans. We had St. Louis Blues fan at the station too. So like we were kind of a big of mix. Obviously, Islanders and Rangers to a certain extent dominated. So there was ribbing. Obviously, Montreal's been in this perennial rebuild probably since I was a kid,
Yeah,
and we haven't
yeah.
really gone far. And so we were all constantly rebuilding. So I'd get a little bit of like ribbing from people about the state of the Canadians, but it was all in good fun. And it was just honestly, it was just nice to be able to talk hockey in general with people at the station because that's what you. A lot of my friends here, obviously, and people that I associate with here in Montreal, obviously into hockey. So to be able to go to New York and have a community, I guess, of people who also like hockey and you felt like you could talk to on the daily just about hockey in general. To me, that was just amazing. So I was happy.
Very good. So that sort of leads into the next question I was going to ask is that you're a graduate student and you're coming not only into a new state but a new country and you're trying this out. Did it take you a little while to get comfortable socially at the station, or did you feel like you were welcome pretty quickly?
Um, Honestly, I felt rather comfortable amongst the people at the station, um, especially coming out of the training class. I mentioned Kenny Conrad, and even while I was still in the training class and kind of wrapping up my training class experience, I knew that I wanted to get involved in Islanders, so I made it a mission of mine to regularly just shadow games. So I would just come into the studio, obviously with permission from Kenny, and I would just sit and watch, just be, full eyes and ears just on everything that was going on, who was doing what were the roles, what were people doing? So I that come the next season when I was already a full time member of the station, I would be able to fully grasp and have maybe a leg up in terms of Islanders and how it works. So I guess through that, I got to meet people early on that were involved in the station. So that was nice. Like I honestly, I felt the camaraderie and I felt comfortable amongst people in the station. There was nobody who gave me too hard a time.
Hmm.
Um, Honestly, yeah, it was just great because I again coming from Montreal, coming from out of country, like I didn't really have, I like family, or I didn't really know people that were there, that were living in New York. All my family was, back in Canada. So for me, it was kind of like coming to WRHU was like it was like developing this family because you're around them so often. You're there like almost day in, day out. You're around the same people. You see them all the time, and so you develop this kind of connection and this camaraderie, with these people. So quickly, obviously made friends, and even some friends like, who I still like try to keep in touch with, or regularly keep in touch with, even though I'm still in Canada and they're in the States. I just try to keep in touch with them. So I would say I felt pretty comfortable early on. And as for being comfortable on air, like as I mentioned, you're nervous early on, and that's normal for sure. But I think gradually, over time, it becomes kind of second nature. You feel more comfortable, you sound more confident. Um, kind of in leading up to this, actually, I found my first the first time I actually went on air for Islanders
Mm.
was doing like a sports updates during the game. And I listened to it and I was like so robotic. I felt like so much like I was reading off a script because I was, but
Hmm.
it just sounded so robotic and so unnatural. And then compared to, I guess, down the road a few weeks later when I did the same thing again, and it just listening, it just felt so much more natural, more conversational. And so I think, it's a natural build. I think everyone goes through that process where you start out, kind of nervous and unsure, and then, but gradually over time you put in the time, you feel more confident in what you're doing. So there wasn't, yeah, I would say, 2, 3 times on air, and then I was feeling pretty good about what I was saying and what I was doing.
Wow, that's great. That's great. That sounds really fantastic for all the effort that you put in. Now, I'm trying to remember the timeline of how things worked out, and you get cleared to be on the air, and you're doing these games. When in the timeline of your time at the station does the COVID lockdown come in? Is that sort of towards the end of your time?
Yeah, for sure. So I was there 2019, 2020, and so I was actually set to graduate in May of 2020. So I was
Mm,
in my last semester at the school and at Hofstra when COVID hit. Um, it's actually funny. I remember it obviously so vividly, but it was about like a Sunday night, and it was a week before March break at the school, or spring break.
yeah.
And we get this email like late on a Sunday night from the school saying there's been like a COVID case on campus, and out of extreme precaution, we're going to shut the school down for the week. And it's going to basically means 2 weeks off, and then they'll reevaluate and see what's happening. Um, Obviously, it's not so easy for me to go home
Hmm.
because I'm across the border, and I actually didn't have a car with me. I was flying. When I would go home, I would fly home. Um, but even so, like I didn't really want to leave because I wanted to stay involved with the station, because at that time I was really hitting my stride. I mean, I was anchoring news. I was fully like involved with Islanders, and I was contributing to virtually every single game. So I did stay, and I remember the Islanders were on the West Coast, the Canadian West Coast actually, and they had a game that next Tuesday night in Vancouver. So it's like a 10 o'clock Eastern start
Hmm.
time. So it's what we would call like those games Islanders after dark. All the lights would be off in the studios, and we would just pretend that we were, because it was super, super late. And we were a skeleton crew even more than normal because obviously people had gone home, and out of precaution, I guess out of COVID too, they were reducing the number of people that were in studio at the time. So we were like maybe 4 or 5 people doing a 10 o'clock game, which proved to be the final game of the regular season before the league shut down.
Hmm.
So I was doing actually sports updates that night in studio, and so that went well. And obviously we were uncertain; we didn't know at the time. But 2 days later, the NHL shut down its calendar, and then flew home. Actually, it was Friday the 13th, Friday March
Hmm.
13th. Flew home to Montreal and never. I mean, actually, I've been back to the station to visit and to see people and stuff, but that was the last time that I was at the station as a full time member, I
Wow.
guess, because then I still was contributing from home once the Islanders season resumed in the summer. They were doing they were in the actually in Canada. They had a bubble set up and they were doing this different version of the playoffs, I guess you will. And the Islanders actually made the conference finals, so they went on an extended run. And I was contributing reports from Montreal. I was preparing feature reports that I was sending over to the producers in New York, and it was running during games. So I was still contributing to the station from afar. But yeah, it definitely sucked, again, because I was there for such a short amount of time and I knew it. And I was, again, hitting my stride. I actually had super exciting um, events or things that were going on. The Islanders were supposed to play a game in Montreal in late March. And I was actually going to fly home and actually cover the game in person from Montreal for the
Oh man.
Islanders radio. So that was super exciting to me because, getting to do it from my, you know, I guess hometown arena to cover the Islanders would have been super, super exciting. So that obviously didn't happen. And even the NHL draft was supposed to be held in Montreal that June. So we were working on, hopefully there's always a draft NHL draft show that's done at the station. So I was you know, working on ways maybe we could, also like have me report live from the draft floor, the venue here in Montreal, and send back reports, like live reports to the 3 or 4 hour show that they put on for the NHL draft. So there was exciting things happening, which obviously got cut short and everything. But you know, it's just, I guess it's part of the curveball, and it's part of like my journey, which has kind of been it wasn't conventional, my journey at the station. So I guess, it comes with the territory. It was um part of the experience, I guess, I can say.
Huh. That's just, my heart's breaking for you because it sounds like you had these, and you said you had these wonderful opportunities set up, and we all went through the thing together. Everyone stayed home, and whether you were in school or working, everyone's life was disrupted in major ways. And thankfully, you made it through safely. But did you have a sense as you got home that you weren't coming back to Hofstra, or was there hope that maybe this will blow over and we can get back to things?
Yeah, I think at first, when I flew home on that Friday the 13th, like I fully had full intentions of coming back, right? Because I guess I was naive, and I guess a lot of us were naive, maybe, to the
Hmm.
like the what COVID was.
Right.
You don't really know at the time. You hear reports and stuff, and I was involved on the news, right, with Hofstra. So we were doing reports on COVID and stuff, but it didn't seem real. I think when it hit me, and also I guess I'd left everything in my dorm. Like I had a suitcase that I brought home with like minimal clothes,
Yeah.
and I basically left everything because I intended to go back. And side note, like I because of there were like border, you couldn't cross the border.
Yeah.
There was all these restrictions and all these crazy things obviously that were going on. So I couldn't even get back, even to get my things. And it was only, I think it was like 2 years later that I was only able to like get my clothes and everything that I left in my dorm. Like everything was there and I couldn't get it. But anyhow, like to jump back, I guess, yeah, I thought that I was gonna go back at first, and then I think maybe when it hit me, like when the spring break week ended and we realized that we still weren't going to go back to school, and my graduate classes were online, and and then a week or two goes by, and then you realize graduation's canceled.
Hmm.
So you're like, okay, obviously, like, and this is it. You're not going to go back, and you just kind of have to make do with it. And again, try to obviously was still involved with the radio station. We were doing newscasts by telephone
Yeah.
from everyone at their homes. So I was anchoring news from here in Montreal, and obviously, as I mentioned, contributing to Islanders once they resumed in July, August of that summer. But so it was nice to still be able to get involved. But I guess, like, again, like, the parts that suck is, like, you're not around the station, you're not around the people, you don't get to see the people, you don't get to go to games physically. you know One of the beauties, I guess, of being also in the sports department is you're always kind of, when you graduate, you're given, like, this nice send off
Hmm.
with they're called, the last locker room, which are these live a show that you get to host, and you get to decide who does what on the show. And it's really, I guess, a celebration of your time at the station. And they put together video or audio montages and of people, your friends and stuff, and it's really like a great thing that everyone looks forward to when they graduate. And so obviously we weren't there. It was nice that they still put on these kind of virtual Zoom call, and everyone hopped on the call, and you got to, like, still, like, reminisce with people, and talk about your experience, and people talk about you, and it was really, really nice. And we still got, like, a montage that was sent to us, but obviously it's not the same as being in studio and having that kind of final send off. So that too kind of was unfortunate about everything. But yeah, you just try to make the most of, like, this crazy, unprecedented situation. And so, I guess I was happy that I was able to still, contribute to the station even from afar, even though obviously it's not the same as the day to day that you're so accustomed to as a member of WRHU.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of value in being there in person and surrounded by your friends and colleagues. And I'm terribly sorry that you missed out on that. If I could, to take this moment of this it's not unrequited, but sort of this ending that certainly wasn't in the script of your time at Hofstra Radio. But can you go back to your mindset when you showed up at the station? What were you hoping the station would be? And then 2 years later, what did it mean to you?
Yeah, I guess I came with a completely open mind when I first got there. Again, like, I knew that I wasn't, going to go down the conventional road, because I knew I was going to be there for 2 years or less. Well, 2 years, which ended up being less than 2 years, I guess, physically there because of COVID. But
Mm,
um I guess I knew I was going there, yes, for grad school, but I was going there for RHU. Like, if there was no WRHU, if there was no Islanders, if there was no, I don't think I would have left home and gone to the school. So WRHU was really what I gone to Hofstra for. And
mm,
so for me, like, I guess I had expectations. I really wanted to be involved in Islanders, and but again, like, I knew, I guess I didn't know fully, because I hadn't really talked to people, but I knew, just I got a sense, obviously, that getting to Islanders and getting on air for Islanders and having prominent roles on Islander broadcasts, it takes a lot of time. And so it's not something that's just gifted to you as it's warranted. I mean, it's a huge responsibility, and it's a big platform. So I guess I wasn't really sure if I was going to be what I was going to be able to do with that, but I had expectations. I really wanted to get on air. I wanted to be involved as much as I could. Um, and honestly, looking back, despite the hardships, despite being cut short and whatever, what have you, but honestly, like my time there just absolutely exceeded my expectations because, if you would have told me when I first arrived in the station that I would be reporting from Islander games, that I would be producing content for game broadcasts, that I would be on the air live reading sports update reports for the station, and then that was then being simulcast onto ESPN radio and Sirius XM, and like my family here and friends in Montreal, like they were able to listen to me live on the radio.
Mm,
Like I would have probably called you crazy if you had told me that when I first walked in, that that's what I would have been able to achieve. So honestly, it's just it's mind-boggling to me what I was able to accomplish for in such a short time at the station. And obviously, I know it's not me alone. I owe so much to a lot of people, like some people that I mentioned earlier, like just that gave me that opportunity, that believed in me, that trusted me, that believed in me early on, and said, allowed me to kind of run with ideas and gave me that support and that backing that I was able to get on the air as quickly as I did, and able to do what I did. And honestly, like, yeah, like WRHU, it's not even a cliche, but a WRHU just like completely changed my life. So I owe so much to that station, and the tools, the skills, the things that you learn there. It's unparalleled. It's like, yes, you have your classes, but this honestly, it's like the biggest crash course of what you can experience. The professionals that we have access to, the software that we have access to, the people that you work with, the platform that we have on New York radio, and covering professional teams. I mean, it's you have to pinch yourself, honestly, that what this is what we're able to do at
mm,
such a young age, and it's while still in school. So honestly, like, looking back, it's just I can only speak so highly about my time and at the station and what it's meant to me.
mm. Wow. Wow, this has been fantastic, Jordan. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. And when you first mentioned your time there, I thought, oh gosh, I'll squeeze in a few extra questions here, but I want to do the full treatment, and I want to get you back on here and ask you a bunch of questions because I have a feeling there are a lot more stories about your time at the station that hopefully you wouldn't mind sharing.
Oh, with pleasure, for sure.
Thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
Thank you.